So welcome to this session, which is the third in the sequence that we have of Samabuddhi and Buddhi Yoga. We've of course done Karma Yoga earlier, and I'm repeating this for the benefit of people who will be viewing this the first time. So coming to the flow of the session that we have today, it's important from multiple perspectives. So here is it that I'm sharing the flow. Now, when we began this entire shortened version of understanding the Gita through 93 shlokas, we had done Sankhya Yoga or Jnana Yoga, where primarily much of the shlokas spoke about the Atman and the fact that we need to have knowledge of the Atman.
गीता का प्रोग्राम आता है मैं कुछ देर में करता हूँ.
Okay, so that's what we had done. Then, of course, we began our entire journey of understanding thematically by jumping straight away to Karma Yoga, and we did the famous shlokas of Karma Yoga, which is Karmaneva Adhikaraste Ma Puleshu Kadachana, which you can see is the first shloka 2.47 in the Karma Yoga series. However, there was a need expressed to look at aspects which connect jnana to karma, and there are two important aspects which connect jnana to karma, which is samabuddhi, and we extensively reviewed samabuddhi over the past two sessions, having done the definitions, having done the methodologies, and having done the implicit goals for samabuddhi. And now we look at Buddhi Yoga, because obviously if you have Samabuddhi, which is a balanced Buddhi, one could say purely by logic of words that if one is having balanced Buddhi, then one is in yoga with Buddhi. That is, one is having an integrated Buddhi. And of course, Buddhi Yoga is important from the perspective of understanding Karma Yoga also. Therefore, it's a little puzzle that we'll have to put together, as the entire Gita itself is like a jigsaw puzzle, and each shloka represents a picture. Interestingly, the picture that we put together is our own individual picture, and that's why the Gita is fascinating. Despite its having been studied by so many scholars, yet the jigsaw puzzle has different pieces which get together differently by the individualities of the people who are studying the Gita. So we are going to be looking at about 14, 15 shlokas, slightly more than 14, about 16 shlokas of Buddhi Yoga today. So how do we look at Buddhi Yoga, and how do we understand its connection to Karma Yoga? And of course, it would logically be seeming to flow from Samabuddhi, where we looked at balanced Buddhi. So I'll move to the next slide. Yes. So this will give you a perspective. Now, before we go to the themes that we have in the Buddhi Yoga sequence of understanding, we need to understand a little bit in terms of the frequency analysis of the words, which you'll find in the banner below Buddhi Yoga. So the word Karman has been used 149 times across the Gita. Atman has been used 112 times. Yoga has been used in conjunction with the different yogas 76 times. Buddhi has been used 48 times. Sama has been used 29 times. And the entire term Buddhi Yoga itself has been used 3 times. Therefore, looking at the fact that, probably broadly speaking, if you go back to the theme, Jnana Yoga is related to Atman. So we did the right thing by looking at the Atman in the Jnana Yoga aspect. Then, of course, when it comes to Karma Yoga, which is the last segment, Karma appears 149 times. So the very practical aspect of the Bhagavad Gita becomes clear. And then we have Sama. Sama is balance. And Sama, as you can see, appeared 29 times, though the shlokas are, of course, important to understand. And looking at the fact that Buddhi and Buddhi Yoga together appear around 51 times, there is obviously a very strong correlation, though not in terms of shloka flow itself, because content analysis is simply a method by which we look at the degree of importance attached to certain concepts by the use of the words and the frequency of the use of those words. So no doubt by way of this analysis, we have clarity that what we are doing in this sequence here is a subject central to the Gita. That much we can logically conclude purely by the numbers that we have. So we now therefore realize that Buddhi Yoga is something that needs to be understood, and we need to therefore look at the ways in which we would understand Buddhi Yoga. So there are five subject areas that we can look at, which help us understand the importance. So one is the fact that it is central to the yoga itself, because we find it at the beginning of the entire teaching, the second chapter. We find it kind of towards the middle, which is the 10th chapter. And we find it towards the fag end also, which is the 18th chapter, 18.57. We look at that. Then, of course, there is something that we can understand in terms of what we mean by an integrated buddhi or a disintegrated buddhi. Then we can look at understanding what are the types of buddhi that people have, because one is to describe the end result, the other is to describe the types of buddhi, because the end result could be integrated versus disintegrated. So we're kind of looking at deconstructing the integration and disintegration, and further understanding other ways of classifying buddhi other than integration and disintegration of the buddhi. Then we look at certain properties of buddhi, because buddhi, you may ask me, where is the buddhi? So it is there in the body. And therefore, what is the relation between buddhi and the body, buddhi and the cosmos? Those are some of the things that we will look at in the properties section of today. And finally, the handshake to Karma Yoga, because going back to the sequence we have here, Buddhi Yoga ultimately has to handshake with Karma Yoga, because it is deemed to be a precursor of Karma Yoga. And therefore, that handshake shloka is 2.50. So 2.50 would be hopefully the last shloka we do today. Assuming that we're able to complete, I think we should be able to complete all these shlokas that we have for our study of Buddhi Yoga. Now, coming to the centrality to the Bhagavad Gita.
Just a brief question, Raj.
Yes,
just
sure.
A brief question. Is this slide, the frequency shown is for the entire Gita?
Yes, it is shown for the entire Gita. I will send you the link which does the frequency analysis of the words. So purely in terms of number, I think Karman is the 10th in the sequence. The first 9 are all connective, like Cha and Cha, Tad, and so on and so forth. I'll send you the link. It will help you understand. But to answer your question, yes, this is for the entire Gita. The entire Gita consists of around 6,000 words, 6,300 odd words. So this is the frequency analysis of those words.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So coming to the concept as to why it is central to the Gita, we have the first indication of Buddhi Yoga in Shloka 2.39. If you would recall the second chapter, of course, the second chapter begins with Arjuna's final objections to fighting and Arjuna's acceptance to becoming a Shishya of Krishna. And thereafter, Krishna starting the coaching or the counseling or the mentoring, whichever way you take it. And when that begins in 2.11, we have the first bit of knowledge that has been given by Krishna to be that of the Atman, and the fact that the Atman does not die, and the fact that the Atman being eternal, it should not really bother Arjuna, and all his despair about killing his relations and his gurus are non-material and insubstantial. Now, having spoken about that, in the transition that happens to Karma Yoga, because if you recall, Karma Yoga is Shloka 2.47. So in 2.39, Krishna has spoken enough about the Atman and what it does. He also speaks very briefly about the Swadharma of a warrior. And therefore, he makes this very important transitional shloka, which is like this. Esha te bhita sankhye buddhir yoge tvimam shunu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. So the Anvaya is, He Partha, Esha Buddhi, Te, Sankhye Abhihitaha, Imam tu Yogeshunu, Yaya Buddhya Yuktaha, Karma Bandham Prahasyasi. So He Partha, which is of course the address to Arjuna, Esha Buddhi. So there is this Buddhi, this intelligence, Te, to you, Sankhya Abhihita. So the Jnana Yoga that I gave you about the Atman, it is based on buddhi. I have used the intelligence to explain the Sankhya Yoga. It has been declared. Now, Imam tu yoge shunu yaya buddhya yukta. Okay. So again, what I'm doing is I'm going to declare to you now the word yoga, which is used in the second line, as you can see, of the Anvaya, the word index. There it means Karma Yoga. So I am going to use the same buddhi to explain Karma Yoga to you, because once you are yukta, or once you are capable of understanding this buddhi, obviously buddhi becomes a fountain of both your Jnana Yoga, buddhi becomes a fountain of both, and secondly of Karma Yoga also. Then obviously Karma Bandhan, that is all the consequences of selfish work, anxiety-ridden work, desire-ridden work, is something that you will cast away, prahasyasi. So this Buddhi Yoga, I'm just reading the red line, which is the English translation. This Buddhi Yoga taught by Sankhya is now declared, so heed, yoke to this Buddhi Yoga, you shall avoid all bonds of karma. So this is how Buddhi Yoga makes its appearance in the Bhagavad Gita. In terms of the term itself, buddhi, buddhya yukta, and buddhi. So buddhi has been used twice over in this particular shloka as the introductory entry of the concept. And of course, in Hindi, we have He Prataputra Arjun, यह तुझे सांख्य शास्त्र के अनुसार बुद्धि ज्ञान कही गई है, अब तू योग विषयिणी इस बुद्धि को सुन, कारण इस बुद्धि के द्वारा योग युक्त हो जाने पर तू कर्मों के बंधन को छोड़ देगा. Okay, so of course, when we spoke about Karma Yoga, we have spoken about the fact that Karma Bandhan is something that you cast aside when you do the task of Karma Yoga in its entirety. So that's how the concept of Buddhi Yoga makes its entry. Now we look at, again, we look at the next shloka where there is a degree of praise for Buddhi Yoga. So the shloka goes for Durena Hyavaram Karma Buddhi Yoga Dhananjaya Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha Kripana Phala Hetava. So this means, He Dhananjay, Buddhi Yoga Karma Durena Avaram Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha Phala Hetava Kripana. So He Dhananjay is Arjuna, Buddhi Yoga, that is, as compared to Buddhi Yoga, Karma Durena Avaram, which means doing the karma without Karma Yoga. That is obviously doing karma the novel way. So it is inferior. Buddhi Yoga is indeed superior, right? So we see in the English translation, action with attachment is far inferior to action done with evenness of mind. So doing action with Buddhi Yoga is straightaway equated to evenness of mind. Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha. So therefore, you have to seek refuge in Buddhi, because Phala Hetava Kripna, when you work for your task from the pure karma perspective and not Karma Yoga perspective, then you are a Kripana, you are a miserable person. So in other words, in the translation, they've directly mixed up Buddhi Yoga with Karma Yoga, as we can see, but we are, of course, taking it separately. We're saying that Buddhi Yoga is a precursor to Karma Yoga, and therefore the cultivation of Buddhi and cultivation of Buddhi, we have seen, is the cultivation of evenness or equanimity. So equanimity leads to cultivated Buddhi, and cultivated Buddhi helps you to execute Karma Yoga in all the tasks that you do. And therefore, that is what is being stated here in this particular shloka. that action with attachment is far inferior, O Arjuna, to action done with evenness of mind. Seek refuge in evenness of mind. Miserable are they who act with a motive for results. Now let's look at the Hindi translation, because the Hindi translation will give us more insights. Hey Arjun, बुद्धि योग की अपेक्षा फल की कामना के लिए किए जाने वाले कर्म निश्चय ही अत्यंत निकृष्ट होते हैं. निकृष्ट मीन्स ऑब्वियसली लेसर. इसलिए तू इस निष्काम बुद्धि का आश्रय ग्रहण कर इसे प्राप्त कर. जो मनुष्य कर्मों के फलों को अपने विचारों और क्रियाओं में उद्देश्य बनाता है वह दीनहीन और क्षुद्र होते हैं. Therefore, we find in 2.39 an entry of the concept, and 2.49 a very clear statement that this will help you do karma yoga properly, and therefore you should depend on this to anchor yourself in karma yoga. So one more link to the entire thing. And anchoring in karma yoga is important because obviously when we look at the frequency analysis, karma comes 149 times. I mean, broadly speaking, of course, we're not looking at the deeper meanings. And therefore, anything that helps in is a kind of precursor or a causative factor is helpful to understand. Buddhi Yoga is one of them. Again, looking at the centrality, we have one more shloka. So we did 2.39, 2.4, 10.10. Now this is at the middle. Now here we have a very interesting jump. So we look at what that jump is, because we have been looking at this sequence of Jnana Yoga, of Samabuddhi, and of Buddhi Yoga and Karma Yoga. Now let us look at what this shloka says. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yenu mamu payanti te. So tesham satatam yuktanam priti purvakam bhajatam tam buddhi yogam dadami. So tesham is to those satata yuktanam who are in constant union. Satata means always. Yuktanam is being in yoga. Priti purvakam, with intense priti or love. Bhajatam. So here we find that there is a connection being made to Bhakti Yoga also. So Bhajatam. So when you, in other words, let us decipher the meaning. Tam Buddhi Yogam Dadami. So Krishna says that I give Buddhi Yoga to those who constantly are in union with the divine, who have great affection for me, and who do bhajan. Bhajatam is who constantly have affection for me. And to them, I give them this Buddhi Yoga. And by that Buddhi Yoga, they come to me. So I was reading a very interesting article in Gita Darpan, which I think Sunil Ji Garg has. So there is a little article on the style of teaching of Krishna. So what Krishna would do is he will praise one form of yoga, and towards the end of his dialogue, he will link it to another form of yoga. He will praise that form of yoga in the next chapter. Let's say that you have a chapter on Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, he'll be fully praising Bhakti Yoga. Then towards the end, he will say it is linked to Jnana Yoga. So there is this interesting chaining process that he has, and this is the chaining that he has done in terms of Bhakti Yoga, though I have not mentioned that in the sequence. In the sequence, I'm not looking at Bhakti Yoga because the intense web-like structure of the Bhagavad Gita is from this chaining and interaction and networking of concepts. But for us to understand, we have to actually disentangle the entire network of concepts and look at it strand by strand. So the interesting thing that I want to share here is that if you think that Samabuddhi will give you Buddhi Yoga, one more way of getting Buddhi Yoga is to be constantly devoted to Lord Krishna in terms of your affection for him and the words. And over a period of time, you will develop Buddhi Yoga. That's exactly what is being said here. Now, how that happens is something that we will have to experience, because the constant chanting and the constant remembrance of the divine is deemed in all traditions of the Indian Vedantic tradition as well as Bhakti traditions to be a way in which you become more and more of what you think. In other words, the tradition is that you become what you think about most of the time. And here, when we say Bhakti Yoga, it is in a way saying that your buddhi is dedicated so much to thinking of the Supreme that you are endowed by a few of the characteristics of the Supreme. And one of the most visible characteristics of the Supreme is intelligence, because the entire world runs on intelligence. And therefore, you assume the property that you are constantly thinking about. So that's the meaning of this particular shloka. It's an important shloka to understand in terms of the link to Bhakti Yoga, as well as the methods of reaching to Buddhi Yoga through Bhakti Yoga. So let's look at the English translation here. To these who are thus in a constant union with me and adore me with intense delight of love, I give the yoga of understanding by which they come to me. So in Hindi we have मेरे साथ सदा युक्त रहने वाले और प्रेम जन्य गहरे आह्लाद के साथ मेरा भजन करने वाले उन मनुष्यों को मैं उस बुद्धि योग को देता हूँ जिसके द्वारा वे मुझे प्राप्त होते हैं. It's a very interesting statement. And you see, I used to often get confused because of this constant reference to other yogas at the end, until I read that little article by Swami Ram Sukdas in Gita Darpan, which very clearly indicated the interlinked mode of teaching that Lord Krishna has in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, coming to just the last shloka on the centrality aspect, and then we'll take up a quick discussion, because if we wait for the entire thing to end, then we would have lost out on some of the questions we have. So towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, again looking at the centrality, that is the theme that we are examining here. So Chetasa Sarva Karmani Mayi Sanyasya Matparaha Buddhi Yogam Upashritya Matchita Sarvam Bhava. So Sarva Karmani Chetasa Mayi Sanyasya. What does that mean? Sarva Karmani is all actions. Chetasa, आपकी जो चेतना है, चेतना is your conscious mind, which means by your will, by your consciously directing, Mayi unto me, and you are, of course, sanyasya. Sanyasya means you're giving up all the outcome outcome, I would not say orientation, outcome obsession, result obsession is what has to be given up. Sanyasya matparaha. Matparaha is, of course, devoting all time to me. Upashritya is resorting to satatam, matchitta. So again, we find that there is a link between Karma Yoga, which is, Sarva Karmani Sanyasya. Then, of course, Buddhi Yogam Upashritya, which means you are dependent on Buddhi Yoga as such. Matparaha, you regard the divine energy as the highest. Satatam Matchitta, and then you devote your constant, thinking to the Supreme. And therefore, when we look at the, meaning, we have surrendering all acts to me by your mind, thinking of me as the goal, resorting to Buddhi Yoga, focus your thought ever on me. And in Hindi we have अपने आप को पूर्णतया मुझ में अनुरक्त करके अपने समस्त कर्मों को अपने सचेतन मन से मुझ में समर्पण करके बुद्धि योग का आश्रय ग्रहण करके सदा अपने हृदय और चेतना में मेरे साथ एक युक्त हो. Okay, so because we have such a long sequence, I'm going to stop the share for a moment and seek out thoughts and questions on the centrality concept that we have done through these shlokas. So I wait for questions. Probably Rajesh has a question.
Yeah, one question, dear. It is mentioned that we should get detached with the results.
Correct.
But we are conditioned likewise. So it becomes some tips to how to get detached with the result, because objective is in the forefront. We get success, then we are happy. We get rejection, we are so evenness of mind means way out some.
Okay, so what, and of course I will address, Sunil's, I just saw the chat, I'll address what Sunil has said. So coming
Let them come.
Yeah, so I will, so coming to the precise answer to what you have said, Rajesh, there is a shloka, which I'll just tell you the shloka number. It's in the 18th chapter. I'm just pulling out my little book, the 18th chapter. And it says, okay, Yeah, Anishta Mishtam, this is the 12th shloka of the 18th chapter, which says, Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha Tribidam Karmana Phalam. Okay, so it says that if you take any action, there is a 33.33 recurring possibility of success, 33.33 recurring possibility of failure, and 33.33 recurring possibility of mixed result.
Even
So we have to accept that there are three possible outcomes. Right? Now, while we will be happy with the outcome of success, we have to be equally aware that we do not control all the times available to us or all the factors that are there. And therefore, we should be equally open. We don't plan for failure. So, you see, being a karma yogi doesn't mean that you plan for failure. You plan for success, you plan for option A, but you're aware that no matter how well you plan for option A, there is option B, which is failure, or option C, which is a mixed result. So once we understand that there are three possible outcomes which we cannot control, then we become happy with whatever we get, but we are equally aware that the result could have gone any other way. So that gives you the balance, which is why you have all these rocket launches. You know, Elon Musk launches a rocket, it fails. So there's every possibility of failure. Now, it is incorrect to say every possibility of failure. There is 1/3 possibility of failure. One failure means in all parameters. Now, usually we don't find failure in all parameters. So we always have, even success when we speak is not always complete success. So usually we get Mishram, you know, Mishram is mixed result. So once we get to accept these three possibilities, we become balanced.
right, right. You have to be conditioned to this scenario.
Yes, we have to be conditioned. So you see, the problem with Western and with modern education is it does not teach you to handle failure. It teaches you constantly only to look for success, but we always understand that there is the possibility of failure, and ultimately failure is only mixed, you know. So Mishram is what happens most of the time, and therefore that's why they say take the good out of what has happened, because there is always some good that happens. Okay. Okay, now I'll come to Sunil ji's question in the chat, which is, I feel that Western philosophies talk about goal setting and tasks to be focused on goals, which leads to attachment. Gita talks about balancing by use samatva concept. Please explain if this is against the common management theories. No, in fact, common management theories fail because of the fact that we are not balanced. So you see, the West is, see, we have been taught only the Western philosophies, and many of the best Western management theorists are slowly veering around to this balanced approach. So obsession with success creates burnout. Obsession with success, it is the type, you see, in stress management, they have type A personality and type B personality. You must have come across that in your career. So type A personality is someone who is obsessed with success all the time and is likely to land up with cardiac problems, with diabetes and everything. It's a proven fact. And type B personality is a little cool. So it doesn't mean that the type B is less successful. We often attribute success. So the only thing is, because the type A personality is so obsessed with success, you feel that the obsession leads to success. But there are a lot of equally balanced personalities who succeed. And therefore, you know, we need to appreciate and understand that. Okay, Vishwarup says we need to set our spiritual goals and find ways to achieve it. Yes, definitely a spiritual orientation helps in appreciating and understanding the balance in terms of goals. And therefore, spirituality in management, spirituality at the workplace is the latest topic of research that we need to appreciate. And the West, you see, the West mode of learning is only incremental, which means they will pursue a concept, they will write some 100 papers about it, and then they will accept that it is available, it is true. They will not simply accept it is true. So while there's a certain amount of rigor to that, but when it comes to matters of spirituality, the whole picture has been seen by the Indian sages, and therefore we don't need to go for the incremental knowledge as far as spirituality is concerned. So we don't have to really look at spirituality at work paper one, spirituality for management paper two, spirituality. There are hundreds of papers which you'll find on the net. It's really not required, because the Bhagavad Gita gives you the spirituality required for the whole aspect of human life, and therefore it is a better model of managing. The unfortunate thing is that neither Indians know about it, and the Westerners who know about it will give it to you by transforming it into their own language. So some of the best Western advice you get is actually Bhagavad Gita transformed into Western language. For example, there's a very famous mindfulness teacher called, Dr. Jan Kabat-Zinn. Okay, his entire masala is from Buddhism and Hinduism, but he has transformed it into modern language and modern terminology. So we think it is great. There are a lot of people who have developed apps on that basis, and you find a lot of young Indians who will be subscribing to apps by Westerners, thinking that Indians don't know anything about it. There's a problem with Indian stuff also. It is couched so much in Sanskrit that we need to really understand Sanskrit. But in a way, Sanskrit is good because you don't distort the meaning when you are dealing with the concept in Sanskrit. So slow and steady wins the race. They have not lost the race. Sanskrit is still around. Intelligent people with buddhi are still around, like in this group, and therefore we have no need to despair on this count. So let me seek out. So Deepak, do you have any questions now?
Not yet. Abhi tak nahi.
Okay, ठीक है. And Sunil,
Yeah,
have I
Rashid,
answered your question? Yeah, Sunil Rastogi, tell me.
Yeah, I'm getting confused between wisdom and knowledge, jnana and buddhi. What is the difference exactly? How can we, although it is a very basic thing?
Yeah. Okay. So let me see. I will just demonstrate. Okay. I wanted to see whether I can have a Jamboard. Let me see. Okay. So let me explain to you. So buddhi is so just like you have the sharir is your body, it is
Yeah.
you have. The sharir has got indriya, so you have an eye, you have an ear, you have a nose, which we understand. Okay. Then you have the manas. Manas is the point where all the reactions and all the stimulus from the senses come. It is like one, receptacle where everything comes. You see something, obviously. Yeah. Okay. So the next faculty you have is called buddhi, which helps you decide. So the decision-making faculty that a human being has is called buddhi. Okay. Now we need to understand one thing about buddhi. So buddhi is the highest faculty. So if we think about the stack, bottom of the stack is sharir. Next level is indriya, because obviously just a body which does not have senses is just the physical body. It's like earthworm. Earthworm has got only one sense, which is a sense of touch. It can only feel the earth. It cannot see, it cannot smell. Okay, so you have different levels. So after the next level is prana. Unless the sharira has got prana, your senses will not work unless it has got life. So a dead body is of no use, but a body which is alive, therefore body, senses, and life in the body. Then on top of that, the next in the stack is what is called manas. Next level in the stack is what is called buddhi, and above the buddhi lies the atma. So knowledge of the atma, so when we say wisdom, when we say gyan, what we mean is the buddhi, which is the level just below that, has to understand what the atma is. Now, okay. So now what happens is this manas, which is there below that, manas is constantly pulled by the senses down. So the manas is only sending all its agitation to buddhi. Buddhi cannot focus on the upper layer. Buddhi is focusing only on the lower layer. So the point is that when you have knowledge of the atma, when your buddhi has knowledge of the atma, this gap is jnana. When the buddhi is only being influenced by the manas, this is agyan. So are you okay with that logic? Sumit?
That is fine.
That's fine, right? Okay.
Yeah, understood.
Okay. So any other questions that we have before we proceed to the next? Okay, so let's proceed to the next segment.
Raj, one more question.
Sure, sure.
Raj, actually, Sunil had asked a very pertinent question. How do we know we are improving, or what exactly are the parameters to know what is happening within us after the Gita session? Like I'm telling you, we should have what I felt was we should have an objective on our spiritual goals. And there are two issues which are major issues with everybody. One is ego and one is lust. The reduction of ego and lust will give us some stability in our thoughts. So when you understand your ego and lust, you are working on those areas. So you have to know what are the areas which you need to diminish to increase your knowledge on ego and lust, or what are the ways to achieve those goals. Like what you rightly said, what I was chanting of mantras will move towards Lord Krishna or the God you have faith in.
Correct.
Like yesterday, I was listening to a part that is on God's, lecture. One devotee, there was a big devotee from ashram who said, look, there was a person come Valmiki who was a dacoit by profession. He became a big philosopher after just by chanting the word Ram and knowing about Ram. And as we know, Ram is one of the places where even we have got factual facts about Ramayana on the sea route to Sri Lanka, which has been informed by our Westerners, not Indians. So the reality is there are a lot of Sanskrit words, the gods who are so powerful, their name itself will move us towards them, which is the ideal requirement for enlightenment. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. So we need to have a spiritual practice, whichever practice that we feel comfortable with, because without a spiritual practice, it does not help you move forward. So in this context, I'll just quote one shloka from the Gita itself, which explains how we can understand this factor. So this is a shloka from the 9th chapter, which says, Api chet su duracharo. Durachar we understand, one of bad behavior. Api chet su duracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva cha mantavya samagya vyavasitosi. So the meaning of this particular shloka, 9.32, I'll give you the exact meaning. Even a wicked man should be considered as a saint if he worships with excessive devotion, for he has begun well. So the point is that we should begin our spiritual practice, otherwise we would not change. And we should persist with this spiritual practice. That's the advice that the Bhagavad Gita gives. So let me go back to the share. Okay, so what we have done is we have done the concept of centrality to the Gita. Let me check whether I've started my recording. Recording is on. Okay. So now let's go to an understanding of a little more about the integrated buddhi and the disintegrated buddhi, because obviously if you've not put in your spiritual efforts, then you would have a disintegrated buddhi. So The first reference to someone with a Durbuddhi lies in the reference to Duryodhana. So in the 23rd shloka, we have this shloka which says, Yotsya manana veksheham yah etetra samagataha dharta rashtrasya durbuddhe yuddhe priye chikirshava. So I put this in just to indicate, so let's look at the meaning. Yuddhe durbuddhe dharta rashtrasya priya chikirshava yete atra samagata yotsya manan aham avekshe. So this is, of course, Arjuna saying that he wants to look at, so this is just before his request, or rather this is just a part of his request to put the chariot between the two armies. But our interest in this shloka lies in the fact that very early on in the first chapter itself, we have this word Durbuddhe, and Durbuddhe is being used for Duryodhana. We will understand this reference because I would like to go back. See, when we look at types of buddhi, which is going to be the next theme, we will find one buddhi called tamasic buddhi. So tamasic buddhi is a durbuddhi, and that is how we will appreciate this reference that we have in 1.23. So as of now, 1.23 is simply a reference to the name of Duryodhana and a reference to the mental type that he has. So Durbuddhi is what he has, and we just take that statement on face value. And therefore, there will not be too much of explanation around this. But the next two shlokas are of great interest and importance to us. We've done this probably earlier, but we will look at it now once again. So this is Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsah Sangasteshu Pujayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodho Vijayate. Then actually it is always read together with 2.63. Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha Sammohat Smriti Vibhrama Smriti Bhanshat Buddhi Nasho Buddhi Nashat Pranashyati. So looking at this, Dhyayato. So Vishayan Dhyayata Pumsah. So Pumsah is a man. Dhyayata, of course, I think the meaning got eliminated. Dhyayata is thinking. So when you think of the objects of the senses, that is one. Teshu Sangham Upajayate. Then you form an attachment to those objects of the senses. Then Sangat Kama Sanjayate. So Kama, then you have desire for those objects of the senses. Then when you are denied the objects of the senses, then Krodha Abhijayate. Then you land up with anger or frustration when you don't get what you want because of the attachment that you have. So the meaning fairly flows. Then Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha. So when you get angry, then there is moha, or there is bewilderment or confusion that takes place, bhavati. Sammohat, what happens? Smriti Vibhrama. So usually when we are in the grasp or in the clasp of confusion, Smriti Vibhrama, we cannot remember the right things to do. We cannot remember our experience. The experience is all the learnings that we've had from previous encounters with such situations or with such kind of people or such kind of ideas. So our entire smriti goes for a toss. Then what happens? So the buddhi depends upon smriti. In other words, the learnings of the buddhi are dependent upon it's able to recollect correct decisions. It's able to recollect correct knowledge, because we said that knowledge of the Atman is an important driving factor for the buddhi to take correct decisions. So if you forget the knowledge of the Atman itself, that is smriti bhamshat, buddhi nasha, and once your buddhi goes for a toss, buddhi nashat pranashyati, you as an individual totally go off. So these two shlokas are indicative of 2.62 and 2.63, are indicative of the process of generation of a disintegrated buddhi. Disintegrated buddhi is a buddhi that is a kind of durbuddhi. So obviously what's happened in the case of Duryodhana is that he does not remember the good lessons taught. Both he and the Pandavas were taught the good lessons, but then it is only the Pandavas who remember because they are closer and they are the ones who choose Krishna to be their guide. And Krishna is not chosen because obviously he is not aligned to the entire matter. What happened here? has happened. Sharing is paused. Why is it paused?
You reshare.
Yeah, I'm resharing. I think I must have pressed something. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, we have 2.62 and 2.63. As I said, looking at the process of a disintegrated buddhi. Now we come to 2.41, which talks about an integrated buddhi. So Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana bahushaka henantashta buddhayo vyavasayinam. So hey Kurunandan, iha means here in this part, Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhi. So Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhi is a fixed and resolute. No? So it is not a dissipated Buddhi. Eka hai. So it is Eka means it is homogeneous. It does not have any klesha. It does not have any confusion. Avyavasayinam. So that is, when you are dissipated, when you are broken up, Buddhi, it becomes Bahushakha. In the sense, it has got multiple branches. It has got multiple thoughts. It is Ananta, and therefore, you become irresolute. So we have a description also of a integrated buddhi. Integrated buddhi is called Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhi, and Avyavasaya Buddhi is Bahushaka and Ananta. So when you have multiple thoughts, when you have, one clear thought that you need to master, you see, ultimately, we need to focus on one thing to master it. If you want to master anything, then we cannot at the same time be thinking of the opportunity of mastering something else. So we all know that if we have to study for our examination, we have written plenty of those across our engineering career, as well as, across our engineering studies, as well as our entire long career that all of us have had, numerous tests and examinations. So obviously, it's only when you're focused that your buddhi can really retrieve from the memory. If your buddhi cannot retrieve from memory, it is unlikely that it is able to come to any kind of resolution. It is unlikely to be able to come to any kind of conclusion. And therefore, this is again looking at the integrated buddhi and the disintegrated buddhi in its characteristics. So I think this should be fairly clear in our mind, unless we have any questions here. So let me just pause for a moment here for any questions that you would have on this aspect. Let me seek out the chat. Stop the share. Okay. So any thoughts on this? You look at the chat. No. Okay. Fine. So this seems to be fairly clear in terms of the understanding of integrated buddhi and a buddhi which is disintegrating, and the process of the attachment, and then the frustration, and then the anger, and then the loss of memory, and then the loss of viveka. So this is all about vivek, which we say in Hindi is the ability to discern and to actually come to a right judgment.
Raj,
So
one question.
Sure. Who's that? Who asked the question?
I'm Deepak Yadav.
Yeah, Deepak. Tell me, Deepak.
Does this loss of buddhi, as in 2.62 and 2.63,
Yeah.
is regained in the act? Is it temporary or permanent?
Okay. So you see, in case we have immediate anger, then obviously it is temporary loss. But what I would say is that if you keep having temporary losses, it is like incrementally reducing your memory power. So therefore, constant episodes of anger or constant episodes will lead to long-term loss. Or it can be such a great shock in one go that you lose your memory itself. That's also possible, right? So that is why we have in the courts what is called murders of passion, right? It means that at that moment, that very wise person lost his entire memory and did something which is called crimes of passion. But I would say that it's a constant chipping away, which is why one of the important things that is mentioned is to be very, very vigilant about what is running in your mind. Because if you are vigilant, then you prevent this constant erosion, and you are able to keep up your moral standing, your intellectual, your buddhi has to become sharper. And the more episode, it's like, having a certain energy balance in the buddhi. So all these things leak out, so buddhi leaks out. And when buddhi keeps leaking out, one day the balloon will not have any air at all. You have to be careful of that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts from anybody? Okay. So let's move on once again, and I will share the deck.
You have 20 minutes from now, so it is better that we postpone questions till the end. And
Okay.
you present things for next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, so for next 10 minutes, I will look at So now we look at types of buddhi, and I think this would take us 10 minutes. So let's look at types of buddhi, because we've looked at one broader categorization, which is integrated and disintegrated buddhi. But is there another way in which the Bhagavad Gita looks at buddhi? So we look at 18.30. So pravrittim cha nivrittim cha karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha ya veti buddhi sa partha satviki. So we have the sattva, rajas and tamas concept being applied to buddhi itself. So let us look at this anvaya. He partha ya buddhi pravrittim nivrittim cha karye akarye bhaya abhaye cha bandham moksham cha veti sa satviki. So ya and sa. So there's a certain condition, and there is a certain end conclusion. So the conditions are about the buddhi. So that buddhi is satviki. Ya buddhi sa satviki. We can take these two. And in between you have the conditions. What are the conditions? Pravrittim and nivrittim. That is what to do and what not to do. Pravrittim is law of action. Nivrittim is law of abstention from action. So kya karna hai, kya nahi karna, which here we find in the red line, this is called activity and renunciation. The renunciation may not be the right word, but yet that's how the translation is chosen. Then what is the next thing? Karya and akarya. Akarya is that is to be done and not to be done. So more or less pravrittim, nivrittim, karya, akarya may be synonyms, but there are fine differences which commentators make out. Bhaya and abhay, right? So what you should be afraid to do and what you should not be afraid to do. So those are things. So when you understand this difference, then your buddhi is a sattvika buddhi. In other words, the sattvika buddhi is characterized by pravritti, means actually pravrittim one pair of meanings for pravritti and nivritti is introspection and introspection, and I will say extrovertedness and introvertedness. But it also means what I do and what I don't do, because when you're extroverted, you do action, when introverted, you don't do action. So essentially, knowing the difference between right and wrong, that is what one would broadly say the sattvika buddhi is. So the translation that we have is that buddhi which knows activity and renunciation, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, fear and fearlessness, bondage and release, so moksha. So there's also a spiritual element that's been added. So, pravrittim, nivrittim, karya, akarya, and bhaya, abhay are mainly at the, intellectual level or body level, but bandham and moksham are at the spiritual level. So you also understand that this will put me into bandhan and I will not do it. This will put me into the path of moksha and therefore I will do it. That's the definition of sattviki. Then coming to the next definition of buddhi, yaya dharmam adharmam cha karyam cha karyameva cha ayathavat prajaniti buddhi sa partha rajasi. So here we have something which is a little bit of the opposite. So in the first case, you know the difference. So here what are we saying? Yaya. dharmam adharmam cha, karyam akaryam cha, ayathavat eva prajaniti. Okay. So, what does this mean? Yaya is for whom? Dharmam adharmam, right and wrong. Karyam akaryam, what is to be done, what should not be done. Evacha ayathavat, right? So does not know clearly, ori, prajaniti, sa pa sa buddhi rajasi. So let's look at the translation. The buddhi which gives an incorrect judgment, so ayathavat, ara, ori is not quite correct. Knowledge about what? Dharmam adharmam, karyam akaryam, and also what should be done, what should not be done. That is a rajasika. So therefore, we are looking at Rajasika to be a dilution of Sattvika, which is logical. Correct. So it's not that you are wrong all the time, but you're not right all the time. Whereas in a Sattvika Buddhi, at least in terms of description, you know very clearly what to do, what not to do, and you also know what is benefiting you spiritually or not by the use of the word Bandha and Moksha that we find in 18.30, to which I have gone to now. So we come to what we will be doing in terms of just the last shloka for the day. And of course, we can do the wrap up next and then we can move on. So adharmam adharmam cha iti ya manyate tamasavrata sarvathan viparitansha buddhi sa partha tamasi. So hey partha, ya buddhi, and of course we have the typical sentence construction, ya buddhi sa tamasi, and what are the conditions in between? Tamasa avrata adharmam dharmam iti. That is, there is total darkness about what is right and what is wrong. And sarva arthan viparitan, ulta. So we have often heard the phrase vinasha kale viparita buddhi. Right? So it is such a clear indication of what you mean by buddhi. So you always take, in English we speak of it as being perverted. Whatever meaning, whatever, and we also have a phrase called kutarka. That is, you use your power of reasoning always to come to the wrong conclusion. And we have, of course, would have met a number of, people in our own careers who are intelligent, but they'll always come to the wrong conclusions. So that kind of buddhis. So of course, let's look at the translation here. That buddhi, Arjuna, enveloped in darkness, regards adharma and dharma. And adharma is dharma and dharma is adharma, which reverses every value, is called a tamasika buddhi. So properties and the other thing, I will stop for a moment because let's not. How much time do we have? I don't know. I'm going to stop the share. We can always complete this later. So we'll open up for broader questions on the session itself as well as the last part of the sessions. So sometimes what does we have to be decisive? Where do I, sometimes we have decisive, indecisive form of buddhi. In fact, when you study the modern concept of transformational leadership, so it has got three forms. One is called transformational leadership, which is equivalent to sattvic leadership. Then it is called transactional leadership, which is rajasic leadership. And then it is called inactive leadership, which is tamasic leadership. So when I don't take a decision, for various reasons, it may be the right thing to do. So we need to understand that we are all combination of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. But tamasic, if we keep adopting the tamasic mode at all points in time, like the memory loss, it becomes a habit. And memory losses will keep accumulating, and habits of tamasic leadership will also keep accumulating. And therefore, our buddhi becomes tamasic, and that in the longer run, does not help our progress. It does not help our spiritual movement to being away from bandha. So that was in response to Sunilji's chat question. Now let's open up for it. Yeah.
There is a word called King Kartavya Vimod. Sometimes what happens is we are indecisive at the moment, but sometimes we consciously put things on stay and think that as if time will heal those things.
Correct.
So how do we classify that kind of state?
It is actually tamasic. It's tamasic. So you don't know what you're thinking. So ultimately, over a period of time, buddhi yoga is given to you, and then you are able to realize what is right and wrong. So at that point in time, the buddhi to decide is not there with that degree of refinement is not there. And therefore, you can only be a tamasic buddhi at that point in time. Maybe you don't want to call it viprita buddhi, you just want to call it tamasic, indecisive. Or you may say even rajasic, because you don't know what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, that means
Is
incorrect judgment at that moment.
Yeah, so your judgment is not accurate at that moment. You'll have to wait till you get that moment of inspiration or the buddhi yoga, which comes over a period of time.
नहीं, मैंने देखा है कभी कभी एक्सपर्ट्स ये बात एडवाइस करते हैं कि इस चीज को फॉर टाइमिंग आप छोड़ दो ताकि ये आगे जाके आपको सॉल्यूशन मिल जाए. That is one of the modes of solving problems.
Correct. It's called incubation. You just incubate the idea, because right now your buddhi is tamasic, but ultimately with bhakti, buddhi yoga is given to you, right? Over a period of time, you may get some idea around the entire thing, and therefore you should have faith in your bhakti. So that is, you should incubate an idea and have faith in the idea. You may not have an answer to the idea now. So this is what we do in our creativity workshop. Hi karte hum log.
Is it true that if I don't take a decision, then time will take or the superpower will take? So normally if I procrastinate, then how long it will be remaining same?
Correct. So therefore what will happen is someone else will take a decision, whether it is a superpower that is taking a decision, your boss will take a decision, right? Or your family member will take a decision, because action has to move forward, and it will move forward. So the universe will take a decision, and then you would be, if you're sensitive enough, you will know where your gap is. If you're not sensitive, then people may take advantage of your indecisiveness. So I have a question here from Deepak. Out of the three buddhis, only particular buddhi will lead to karma yoga? No, I would say all the three buddhis lead to, some kind of karma. But to answer your question, in terms of karma yoga, I would deem that sattvic buddhi and rajasic buddhi will lead to karma yoga, because rajasic buddhi is not a bad buddhi. It is not a perfect buddhi. So therefore, of the three buddhis, purely in terms of type, to answer our understanding, tamasic buddhi is definitely not karma yoga, but rajasic and sattvic, so sattvic is 100% karma yoga. I would say rajasic buddhi is, sometimes you take the right decision, sometimes you take the wrong decision. So I would say there would be a certain amount of inconsistency in the yoga, that in the karma yoga attitude towards work. Now the next question is from Ratan Tata. We need to balance. So ultimately the thing is that we have to understand where our career is. Career is for, ultimately, if you use every aspect of your life and career for elevating yourself spiritually, you are better off. If you use it only for acquiring things materially, then beyond a point, how much food can you eat? How many houses can you live in? No matter how many crores you have, you can only eat so much food, right? So beyond a point, money is of no use. Beyond a certain physical, comfort level, or what we call hygiene factors. So if we are constantly devoted only to hygiene factors, then we are not likely to progress spiritually, because we are stuck at one point. We are stuck at one node. We are not moved, beyond that node. So Bishu, let me just check any other questions. So what time are we on now? It's 12:54. We have plenty of time. So again,
We have about 8 minutes.
Yeah. So again, open to, so maybe I should, complete the 3 shlokas if you have no questions now. Yeah, so that, we would have completed the topic and we would have done justice to the 1.5 hours. So let me again go back to share screen. Okay, so we did types of buddhi, and we also answered some questions on types of buddhi in terms of which type of buddhi leads to karma yoga, because at the end of the day, if you just go back to the whole logic that we have here, we seem to be saying that buddhi yoga leads to karma yoga. And of course, we'll have the link to Karma Yoga, which I'll be talking about. But let's look at some of the properties of Buddhi. Not a Buddhi Yoga, but a Buddhi. So coming to 7.4, this is a very interesting shloka. It says, Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayu Kham Mano Buddhi Revacha Ahamkaram Iti Yamme Bhinna Prakriti Rashtada. So Bhumi, Apaha, Analaha, Vayu, Kham, Manaha, Buddhi, Ahamkara Iti Iyam Me Ashtada Bhinna Prakriti Eva. So Bhumi, we understand earth, Apaha is water, Analaha is fire, Vayu is air, Kham is space or ether, Mana is mind, Buddhi is reason, Ahamkara is our ego, and Iti Ashtada, eightfold, Bhinna, divided Prakriti. So this supreme energy that we have is categorized into 8, of which we understand the first 5, Bhumi, Apa, Anala, Vayu, Kham, is what we call Panchabhutas. Then you have Mana, Buddhi, Ahamkara, which are also a part of nature itself. Therefore, Mana, Buddhi, and Ahamkara are the way the 5 Mahabhutas come together. So you see, if I have, so the point is like this, that if I have all the chemical constituents of the body, by putting those constituents together, I don't get a human being. Because the human being also has got Buddhi, has also got Mana, has also got Ahamkara. And therefore, that is the unique contribution that makes us individual. And we need to appreciate and understand that aspect of Buddhi, that it is what gives life to the entire Panchabhutas. And it is also a part of nature. So the supreme energy has created this. So obviously, for a stone, it has not created Buddhi, it has not created Mana, it has not created Ahamkara. So we as human beings are uniquely endowed with an aspect of nature. That is the meaning of this particular shloka. Then 3.42, in fact, addresses the question that I had explained to Sunil Rastogi. So it says, Indriyani Paranyahu Indriyabhya Paramana Manasastu Para Buddhi Yo Buddhe Paratastu. So the hierarchy that I had explained, senses, so he says what? Indriya, senses, Parani are supreme. They say Indriyabhya Param Manaha. So Manaha is, the Manas is higher than the senses. Okay. Yahatu Para Buddhi, right? So even higher than the Manas is the Buddhi. And even higher than the Buddhi is the Saha, the Purusha. So, in other words, this is the stack which explains. So, the first shloka explains that it is a property of nature. Second shloka explains in the human body itself where exactly it lies in the hierarchy. So, Indriyani, Paranyahu, I think I've explained this. They say that senses are superior to the body is superior to the senses, the intellect is superior to the mind, and much higher or much superior to the intellect is the supreme intelligence. So this stacking that I spoke about in terms of understanding the hierarchy is what is explained here. So we've already covered this. Then we come to the final shloka that we have for the day, which is the great link to Karma Yoga. So what is this link to Karma Yoga? Buddhi yukto jahati ubhe sukrita dushkrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karmasu kaushalam. So Buddhi Yukta is one who's got Buddhi Yoga. Then of course, what happened? Sukrita Dushkrite, good and evil. Ubhe dono iha jahati. Because obviously you're doing the work in a way that you understand what is right and what is wrong. And therefore you go beyond Sukrita and Dushkrita. Tasmad yoga yujyasva. Therefore be in this Buddhi Yoga. And because when you're in the Buddhi Yoga, yoga karmasu kaushala, you are able to do Karma Yoga. Correct. So yoga karma kaushalam is something that we often hear in our definition of yoga. So he who abides in the Buddhi, I'm reading the red translation in the red type. He who abides in the Buddhi casts off here in this world both good and evil deeds. Therefore, yoke yourself to yoga. And let's look at whether the Hindi translation provides us with greater insight. जिसने अपनी बुद्धि को भगवान के साथ युक्त कर दिया है. So obviously, this is linking it with the Atma. This is in line with what we had done here, where higher than the Buddhi is the Atma. So there's a logic that is flowing, जिसने अपनी बुद्धि को भगवान के साथ युक्त कर दिया है, वह इस द्वंद्वमय लोक में ही शुभ कर्म और अशुभ कर्म इन दोनों का परित्याग कर देता है. इसलिए समत्व बुद्धि रूप योग के लिए प्रयत्न कर, समत्व बुद्धि रूप योग ही कर्म का कौशल है. So this Hindi translation especially is very useful in establishing the link between Samatva, Buddhi Yoga and Karma Yoga, which were the three links that we were planning to establish at the beginning. So in fact, I wanted to put that opening slide here. I just forgot to put that. So coming back to the opening slide. So we are seeing how Buddhi Yoga flows logically into Karma Yoga through the last shloka, which is 2.50. So we have exactly about 2.5 minutes left. So I'm going to stop the share and take some quick questions on the matter.
Yes, sir. This 7.4.
Yeah.
It says Ahankar is also a Prakriti, supreme
Yes.
energy.
Yes.
Here there is some contradiction, it looks like.
Yes. So
For
this is a very, very correct question you asked. So you see, Antakarana, जो हमारे, so we have external equipment, which is the body and senses. अंतःकरण के 4 components होते हैं. एक तो बुद्धि, एक मनस, एक अहंकार और एक स्मृति. Smriti is memory. Now, now these 4 are deemed to be a part of Prakriti. Now there is a contradiction. You're very right in having spotted out the contradiction, because this, see, on one hand we say that when you are reborn, right, the Atma travels with the buddhi and the qualities that you acquired, throughout life. Your samskaras lie in the buddhi. So a certain component of the buddhi travels along with the Atma. But the Atma, so the logic of saying it is Prakriti is, it is, so in the Advaita Vedanta concept, anything which is not Atma is Prakriti. So that is the logic that is used to explain, because I was perfectly confused myself. So Anatma and Atma they use. Atma is the pure soul that you have. So Buddhi, Ahamkar and Smriti, they all ultimately they get diluted. You see, when you have totally achieved your moksha or you're totally achieved your understanding, then Ahamkar is not there, as Vishwarupa was saying. Ahamkar gets diluted. Then all your buddhi and all your smriti also gets diluted, because you go and join, your Atma goes and joins the Supreme Atma. So you don't retain any individuality, because you would say that aapki apni buddhi hai. There is a Sunil Rastogi's buddhi, there is a Rajshekar's buddhi. So that we have. Okay. So we have to understand the particular way in which the term manas is used in the Indian philosophical tradition. So in the Indian philosophical tradition, the manas is simply a kind of storehouse of all the stimulus that comes from the senses. So your eye sees, it deposits whatever it sees into the manas. Your nose smells, it deposits all the stimulus into the manas. And so on and so forth, we can name for each sense. And based on your instinct and based on your samskara, so your samskaras lie embedded in the mind. So based on, so your ultimately your instinct are samskaras that are built in over your human species.
It's subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Subconscious.
Yeah. So that is what we say in modern psychology. In Indian psychology, we don't use subconscious, preconscious, all that we don't use. We simply say manas is the collecting house of all the, so you have indriya, and you have panchendriya, and you have indriya vishaya. Indriya vishaya is the object. So unless I have something to see, so indriya vishaya, indriya, then you have manas. So indriya vishaya gives input to indriya, indriya gives input to manas. Manas works on samskaras and tells the jnanendriya, right, what to do. So you have 2 levels of indriyas or 2 categories of indriyas. Jnanendriya and Karmendriya. So I see something, then I tell my hand to go and do something. I tell my leg to go and do something, or I tell my voice to go and say something. Now, this is totally unaffected by buddhi. Buddhi is at a higher level. So now what happens is typically, because it is there as a kind of transitional layer, most of the time we use our buddhi for only supporting the mind. So buddhi जो है वो हाँ में हाँ करते रहता है. Right. Now we don't want buddhi to do हाँ में हाँ. We want buddhi to actually get linked with the Atma on top and tell the mind whether it is right or wrong. So the manas is therefore always regarded at a lower plane than the buddhi. So the Western philosophies and psychologies do not make this distinction between manas and buddhi. They simply talk conscious, pre-conscious, subconscious, which is actually of no use at all. It doesn't help me anywhere. So subconscious can be memory, pre-conscious, so it just does not help you. So we have to understand that certain kinds of categorizations that we have are of no value in the Indian philosophical tradition. So this pre-conscious, subconscious, superconscious, all is maybe you can find a lot of papers written on this, but it does not help you 1 inch in your bandham and moksham. So I would say the more you say pre-conscious, subconscious, aapka bandhan zyada ho jata hai. You don't understand. And the moment you use manas and buddhi, you have the entire literature of India which is available, which will give you guidance. So that is my realization. See, ultimately you can try to do some mapping between one concept and the other. You will always find some similarity. But it's a faltu ka kaam, it doesn't help you in any way. So I would rather go by the classification of manas and buddhi and not think of conscious, subconscious, pre-conscious, because I tried doing the exercise many years ago. I found it's a wasteful exercise. It is simply because भाई हम लोग अंग्रेजी में बोल रहे हैं और अंग्रेजी में हमने इतना कुछ पढ़ा है, तो अंग्रेजी में जो भी साइकोलॉजिस्ट होता है वो प्री-कॉन्शियस बोलता है. But if you read any Swami in Hindi or in any regional language, वो कभी प्री-कॉन्शियस, सबकॉन्शियस यूज करेगा ही नहीं. ये तो सिर्फ अंग्रेजों की देन है, according to me.
दूसरा concept altogether different.
Yeah. So this is my so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any final questions for today?
You can decide the next meeting time now.
Yeah. So I think we'll make it 11 o'clock. Is that okay with everybody?
This group.
I suggest 11:30.
11:30. Okay, fine. So we'll make it 11:30 to 12:30.
11:30, 12:30. Okay.
And if there's a need for a slightly longer session, we can always go up to 1 o'clock, which is okay.
1:15 also is okay.
Okay, fine. Okay. So 11:30 is the time that I will have for the next session. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. And of course, Sunilji, I will reach out to you on this whole business of posting the recording and all that. I'll reach out to you. Okay.
Today's recording, the raw recording you can post immediately, no? That's okay.
Raj.
Yeah.
Raj, my last question. I just wanted to. I have really learned a lot from this session, but what I thought was about the indriyas which you are talking of. Say, yeah, such you this Rajasic, Tamasic, and Sattvic. Yes, tell us a little bit of Sattvic ways of things in every session, so that we know what wrong we are doing, what is the deviations we are. It is happening in our day-to-day life. Because Sattvic is.
Achha, sir. So then I'll give you some homework. Homework is, please read chapter 18. I will say shloka 20 to 40.
20 to 40.
Yeah, or maybe 18, 19. You can make out from the subject 20 to 41 or 19 to 41. That whole thing looks at the whole concept of Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic from different perspectives. So it's actually a full session by itself. So with that, thank you so much. It's been a very, very interesting session because you've done these interesting linkages, and I look forward to next week. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, then.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.